Have you ever felt so drawn to something that you'd throw away the rest of your life just to have it? The past, the present, and the future are like they were all dwarfed in comparison to this. Of course, it didn't start that way, but this idea rescued from the void at the back of our minds began to grow and grow, replacing so many others which never made it back out. Maybe it felt like it would make it all make sense, like within that dense and confusing fog of life there was a sudden break, and right in the clearing, right there it was, the reason for it all, the final piece of the puzzle, the secret to success, the way to keep going, or finally, just for once, the excuse to keep going for the first time, and that if you can get there, if you can make it to this thing, then it's all worth it, everything thrown away, everything before it, all of it at once. This is what it's all been leading to, make or break, do or die, it is finally it. And how far does this go? Is it all actually worth it? To think about this thing over every meal, almost not eating because it's just consuming you instead? Does it keep you from sleeping, keeping you up at night, pondering this thing in your mind? Does it become the only thing you can talk about to the people who care about you and they just get tired of hearing about this one thing? What do you lose for this, and how soon will you regret those losses? There is some truth to powerful moments or single things or experiences that make or break a life. They become a part of us in ways that we can never help. But we always harbor some input over how much of us they are, and this is a fine line. When does inspiration or desire turn into something much more extreme and dark? When are we consumed by a single part of who we are, becoming almost inhuman? Today, our story is obsession, a look at the times when I want to becomes I have to, and all the danger within it, the irony it contains, and how much it can damage our lives. Of course, to address obsession, we have to look at how it's formed. We don't just wake up one day and decide that we're going to devote our lives to something. There have to be conditions in place which dictate that decision. Homura Akemi from Madoka Magica is of course a prime example of this and how it begins. Due to some time manipulation, we see our earliest point much later in the story. She isn't the cold, mysterious girl we see in episode 1, but rather a shy and unconfident one, suffering from a condition that kept her out of school, so she's well behind everyone else. She hasn't been in class, so she doesn't have any friends, doesn't know how to make them, and doesn't know the material, so the classes only remind her of the fact she's so behind, and her condition keeps her from being able to even keep up in something like gym. We never see her family or where she lives, so we don't know what's going on there either. Where everyone else is either going to the mall or home to living families or anything of the sort, she walks home alone feeling worthless. Now, in this world, there are creatures known as witches. They are unknown evils which appear as natural disasters or accidents to the people who can't see them, but are actually living beings who prey on the negative emotions in the hearts of people to end their lives. They convince seemingly healthy individuals to jump off of roofs or fill a room with poisonous gas as a group, or in Homura's case, they find these feelings of worthlessness and take them to the extreme. I'm behind, I can't catch up, I should just die. While she's wandering alone, she falls into a labyrinth, which is the dwellings of one of these such witches, and is certainly about to die, if not for Madoka Kaname and Mami Tomoe, two magical girls who save her. Magical girls are, well, girls with magic. In exchange for one wish, they gain these powers and have to fight witches to survive. Madoka is actually from Homura's class, and she's the one person who seemed to take a genuine interest in her, saving her from being swarmed and overwhelmed by random questions. For Homura, who feels unable to do anything herself, this is critical. She can't really make a friend, but a friend can make her. As Madoka saves her, this is what happens. An excuse is made for them to spend time together and grow closer, and this is where the obsession begins to form. This is because Homura went from having nothing to live for, stuck in a world where everything seemed dim and evil, and then out of nowhere to literally save her is the kind and caring Madoka, the type of person who becomes your friend for you, even in a design that is literally a spark shining through this darkness. Through her good intent to save other people at her own toil, she provides the platform for Homura to become an obsessive person. This one girl is her ticket to ever being anything. This one girl who can do these kinds of things for her, making her feel so loved and valuable. Suddenly, Homura has something to be around for, but because it is literally one thing, it becomes all of her being. She exists for Madoka, because without Madoka, she wouldn't exist. Obsession is when one thing consumes your being, so what more effective way for it to form than one thing providing value to someone with nothing? What compounds this for Homura is her lack of ability. She has many genuine excuses for being unable to find something of value on her own. She can't keep up at school, so maybe she could take up some other pursuit, but school is required, so this means all her extra effort and time has to go into that, and being physically held back as well. She can't find something in a physical route, and all that effort would then just exhaust her even quicker, and suddenly it forms this downward spiral we found her in. She has nothing, and believes she never will. She was the perfect case for an obsession. For the most part, she just tags along with Madoka and Mami on their magical girl adventures. Of course, Kyubei, the one who makes contracts with them, powers in witch fighting in exchange for a wish, would love to make one with Homura as well. But what reason does Homura have to make one? Everything she could have wished for was right here in Madoka. It's a fitting parallel. Wishes in this world are a kind of obsession themselves. From many circumstances, they come to define the person who made it, oftentimes corrupting their entire being into some sort of unforeseen result of their wish colliding with other people's desires. Kyoko, for example, wishes for her family, leading to it falling apart, leading to her being alone and refusing to help others ever again. The results of this wish define her key trait and most of how she acts. So in a sense, Homura really does already have the same thing with Madoka. There is no reason to wish. At least for a while. Coming over the horizon of their world is Walpurgisnacht, a terrible and fearsome witch greater than any they've ever seen before. It spells certain destruction for the entire city, including Madoka and the other magical girls, and this is what happens. Madoka dies fighting Walpurgisnacht, and Homura is left alone, without the thing which gave her any value, and facing a destroyed city. This is somehow even less than what she had before. But now she has a reason to wish, and so she makes a contract with Kyubei.
I wish I could meet Miss Kaname all over again, instead of her protecting me. I want to be strong enough to protect her!
Now, wishes define the powers a girl will receive as well. For example, Sayaka, who wishes to heal someone she loves, becomes someone who can heal exceptionally quickly. As such, when Homura wishes to meet Madoka again, she gains the ability to manipulate time, either pausing it while she can still move around, or traveling backwards to the day she and Madoka met. While she was already defined by Madoka, this solidifies it. She's given up even her humanity to be with her. Who Homura is doesn't matter to Homura, as long as whatever it is with Madoka. This forms a self-justifying cycle. At each juncture, Homura decides to give up more and more of herself for Madoka. There is no way to stop Walpurgisnacht, which means Homura ends up living the same few months again and again and again, seeking for a way to save her love, and each time trying harsher and harsher methods. She goes from not knowing the first thing about combat to stealing guns from the Mafia to using them like a pro, attempting to blow her enemy out with endless munitions. Giving up more and more of herself every go around, she has more and more of a reason to see it through, because stopping means having sacrificed all of that for nothing. And so one never reaches the point of wanting to stop to save themselves because there is nothing left of themselves. An end to the obsession means death either way. You can see how this makes them into nothing more by how simple the outcomes are. There's no branching future for what their life could be. It is simply one moment of success or death. So what does it matter if success means changing or sacrificing the entirety of who you are, because either way, it's a better end result. And this happens with Homura. She goes from a bright and happy person around Madoka to a gloomy and angry one, often outright confronting her love about how stupid or nonsensical her desires can be. The only thing keeping Madoka from running away from someone so hateful to her is her supreme ability to believe the best in everyone. The goal keeps narrowing. First, it's to be happy with Madoka, then, well, it's just to be with Madoka, and then, oh god, please just survive, Madoka. To avoid that inescapable option which arises from being defined by an obsession, Homura has to keep settling for less and less from an overall, meaning she herself is less and less each time. Homura's methods do eventually lead to a defeat of Walpurgisnacht though, but in a way she couldn't handle. Since Madoka was the center point of all of these timelines being created, she becomes of immense weight to the composition of the universe, which means if she did make a contract to become a magical girl in this main timeline, she would be the most powerful one yet. So she eventually makes her wish.
I wish I had the power to erase witches before they're born. From the past, present, and future. Everywhere.
Crucial to understanding this wish is that witches are magical girls who have fallen into despair and become evil. So what Madoka is wishing for here is to prevent those girls from becoming monsters, respecting that they made wishes and allowing that to remain, but saving them from becoming ultimate evil. It's something she desires because she spent the entire series being helped by others, feeling powerless and watching all her friends suffer. To grow as a person, she wants to help them all for a change. This wish is her becoming the kind of person she wanted to be, and that's something Homura can't handle. Obsession is just that, it is a self-justifying force around one point. What Homura wished for was not to save Madoka, it was to meet her again. She wished for the moment they met, the moment which provided her value, the moment where Madoka was what she needed, not what Madoka herself wished to be. The fact that Madoka feels weak and useless itself is even a result of Homura's wish. She was a strong magical girl when they met, but in trying to protect her, Homura leaves her feeling like a worthless parasite in this different timeline. From the very first moments, her wish was trying to keep Madoka docile and contained. With Madoka becoming a part of the universe's rules to achieve her wish, Homura can no longer undo things with time travel and is forced to face a world without her obsession. Unable to cope, she becomes a witch herself, with some assistance from evil forces preventing Madoka's universal rule from saving her, and creates a labyrinth which tricks even herself. Within it, she meets Madoka again, and they live a happy, idyllic life where, even though they fight evil, nothing really goes wrong. It's a playground for these friends to live out the lives Homura got a glimpse of when she was saved, laughing and smiling as they swap lunches on the roof or mull around for the stunning parks. But this can't last forever, as the cracks begin to show when Homura realizes this place is a contradiction. It's supposed to be for Madoka, as everything she does is, but this is a place which disrespects Madoka. It's one where she never became the strong person she wished to, instead saying she would never do anything like that to hurt her friends, disappearing as she did in the real world that this version of her is unaware of. And here, Homura is forced to realize it. Her desire is holding her desire back. Her obsession made her blind. As the cycle pressed more and more and more on her, she wasn't acting for Madoka. She was acting for what Madoka represented to her, a value she couldn't find in herself. But the problem with an idea of someone is that people change. How do you countenance this fact that you love this person and they define you, but your love for them is holding them back? Well, Homura takes an interesting path. Madoka eventually does save her, as she's a positive force of the universe, but when they meet in true, Homura rips Madoka apart. She creates two beings, a Madoka of the past and of the present. The one who she originally met, and the one who changed into the person she wanted to be and became a part of the universe's laws. Once again, things have narrowed. She confirmed her selfishness and made peace with it. She'll just take what she wants. To try and maintain herself, which depends on a changing creature with their own thoughts and feelings, Homura accepts that she can't have all of Madoka, so she'll just take a piece of her. That's how far things have fallen for what defines her. What was once living happily with someone is now holding them hostage. Obsession makes one blind to its very object of it. It begins to not matter if the object is healthy or not, or truly found success. What matters is just that we have something to define ourselves around. To obsess over one thing alone requires holding it forever, for better or for worse, because to let it go is to lose oneself. And lose herself, Homura does. These split pieces of Madoka can't be kept apart, as core to her is this desire to help other people. I mean, this is how she and Homura met in the first place. There's no way to have the Madoka she met without her having this trait that would leave her to leave Homura behind. Even though she couldn't remember the choice she made, her being still feels drawn to that power she held, and so Homura witnesses that her attempt has failed yet again. And so she resolves herself to be the ultimate evil to Madoka's ultimate good. This is a world which relies on balance. Every good has an equal bad, every positive a negative, every bit of love an ounce of hate. So if Madoka is good, then Homura can always exist with her if she is the balancing evil. And this is what remains of her at the end. Who is she? She is evil itself, no longer even really a person. Defining oneself with one obsession means never truly defining oneself at all. It only means slowly losing any meaning there once was to avoid the ultimate end. To swap to a story set firmly in reality, we also have 91 Days. It's a series I didn't like much at first, but now actually find I may have somewhat overlooked. It's a story of lifelong revenge set in the prohibition era of America, where crime bosses ruled large with moonshine empires. Entangled with one of these mafia families, the Vanettis, is the Lagusa family. There's Testa the father and Elena the mother, Angelo the elder brother and Luque the younger. Not that it really matters though, a coup within the mafia family leads to Testa being killed to wrap up loose ends and former loyalties, and since the rest of the family witnessed that, they can't be allowed to live either. Except for Angelo, who was able to hide during the whole ordeal and narrowly escapes as one member of the Vanetti family hesitates to shoot him as he runs away. He changes his name to Avillio Bruno to hide, and from here he lives out his days doing, well, nothing more than existing. He pickpockets wallets to survive and brings them back to a rundown building devoid of anything but the bare necessities. He takes the money from the wallets, throws them under the bed, maybe eats just enough to live, sleeps, and that's it. He has one bed, one crate, one cup, and nothing which holds any value for him other than maintenance. That's his life. He's had nothing to live for ever since his family was taken away years ago. That is, until a letter arrives naming the members of the Vanetti family involved in killing his own. And in this, he finds the one thing to define his undefined being around: his obsession, revenge. He will make the Vanetti family endure everything which he felt losing his family, a total collapse of their empire. This finally gives him a reason to act, and he becomes a huge part of the mafia dealings of this city from this point on. This desire is strong enough for him to arguably become the person who dictates the future here, as his subtle manipulations drive the decisions of every major family. But who is actually deciding? If he's just a vessel for revenge, just making whatever choice harms this family, is he really doing anything at all? Is he anyone, or has he just become their downfall embodied? One of the obvious ironies about the whole situation is that in destroying them from the inside means becoming a trusted member of the Vanettis. He has to do this in order to get close to the Dawn, and so in going for total annihilation means joining the very people he hates so. By the turn of his plot, he's one of their most trusted members and just about best friends with Nero, the brother in line for succession, and Dawn by the end of the series. I mean, at some point they go on a road trip and put on a silly act for some kids and share their secrets with each other around the fire, and he basically makes a legitimate new family just to kill them all, abusing the ideals of trust and loyalty to avenge the same things buried with his family. He turns from a sweet child into a vicious killer, harming guilty and innocent people alike. Part of his plot is forcing Nero to kill his own brother Frate, who in reality is just a kid trying to find his way amongst a toxic family, putting a ton of pressure on him, and the same plot beat leads to their sister Fio having to flee her life there with an unborn child to now care for on her own, separated from the people she did everything for. These are the same kinds of people like his own family, just caught up in the bad decisions of others they couldn't help. An obsession like this could never lead anywhere but repeating the mistakes which caused it in the first place. It gave him a reason to be the exact thing which robbed him of any value to begin with. By the end, he hates who he is, a drunken murderer unable to sleep and haunted by all the people he's killed in the past, recognizing that he is only part of a cycle. But he can't stop because stopping is the same as dying. Finishing the plan is just one last act of validation, seeing it through because what else is there to do? Might as well end in the impactful way he planned, right? And there's something to note in being obsessed with an achievable goal. He can and does bring down the entire Vanetti Empire, entangling them in a losing war until the last member is wiped out through intense manipulation of tensions. But now with this accomplished, who actually is he? He could have fled the city and lived on after he succeeded, but he stays to be captured by Nero because this obsession never actually gave him any value to act on. So when it ends, he's just further back than when he started. Success at his obsession is the thing that actually kills him. As Nero tries to escape and brings Avillio along to try and understand why he did all of this, the latter remarks,
"I thought if I saw it through to the end, maybe it'd give me a reason to live, but there ain't anything left. All of it was for nothing."
Nero grows insanely angry and scolds him for this, of course, because all of those people he loved died, and the man who did it says it was for nothing. They don't even get to be worthwhile in giving him a new meaning through their deaths. They just died to die, a much worse insult than revenge. There was nothing to be found in this because Avillio never actually obsessed over revenge. He obsessed over loss. He was so focused on what had been stolen from him that he could never even consider gaining something else, including a new reason for being. As long as he held that moment as the only thing which could define his life, it was as good as over. That plot was just the best representation of his loss by making it real for someone else too. It was a spark of validation to see if he could make someone who feels the same as him. He's of course justified in feeling so meaningless after witnessing such a horror and losing everything he loved so young. But he never moved on from that loss, and it made him blind to the fact that he had something to live for all along. In those happy days with his family, there was someone else, Corteo, his best friend. His father was killed in mafia dealings, leaving him and his mother somewhat struggling, and the Lagusa family helped him out where they could. He was there the night of the murders, but had left just before they began. After they're finished, this is where Avillio runs to spend the night, having nowhere else to go. Corteo offers all the support he can and makes a vow that they're brothers who will always help each other out. He'll pay back the Lagusa's kindness to Avillio. But Avillio leaves the next morning, and they don't meet again for many years. When they do, Corteo has cooked up the best moonshine recipe anyone has seen, in an attempt to make the money his family never had as a child. It's not his favorite profession, but given the times, it could provide what he needed. But one thing holding him back is his refusal to work with the mafia. Having lost a family member to them, he detests their business and recognizes the dangers of working with them. You trade your freedom for that money. So he tries to stick it out on his own, an independent seller in a mafia town, often subject to their intimidation as they try to put him under their thumb for a profit. Saving him from one of these aggressive moments is Avillio, swooping in and coming with a suggestion. Just work for the families and make all this money. Of course, we know why he can say this so easily. This moonshine, the work of someone else, is his excuse to get close to the families. He gets close to them initially by selling them Corteo's great product. He abuses their genuine connection to make this false connection work. Both of them already know how dangerous these dealings can be, and were reminded of it at every single turn with assassinations and backstabbings and shootouts and so much more. The straight-edge Corteo wants nothing to do with this, but there's something more important to him, the vow of brotherhood he made. As kids, he was someone who looked up to Avillio's boldness, seeking to overcome his own timidness and be more like his best friend. He moves forward from this pact, turning from the one scared to put out the flame with his hands to the one who can do so. This trust and connection which drives him forward is what Avillio abuses to get close to the family. Someone with the traits a family bond should have, used as nothing more than a stepping stone to find a fake one to kill. It's more than irony. This is what Avillio missed when he became obsessed with Lost. It made him blind to anything else he could have had. The entire world faded away except for the fact that his family was taken from him, despite the fact that he had almost exactly what they were right here. Someone who thinks of him as a true brother, who defends him as a true brother, who trusts him as a true brother, even when he feels his decisions are entirely wrong. Together, without the Mafia, they could have been great. We see this in the very first moment Avillio shows up to defend him. That's what Corteo was missing, the street smarts to move his product and the muscle to defend it, and his brother solves both of these issues. And being together would only inspire him to be better again as he was in childhood. When Avillio says that the only thing his life is worth is revenge, he's disrespecting this fact because he can't recognize it. His life isn't worthless, it's one of the things that made Corteo's possible, and it could have done so even more right now. But he can't because he's obsessed. He misses it so much that he uses it as the stepping stone for something that in the end he admits was truly worthless. He actively ruins Corteo's life instead, driving his only real family member left down the mafia path. Once a bright and aspiring young man, one who never even got to really live life because he was so dedicated to creating a better future, Corteo never gets to see that future he worked towards because it's stolen away. After a few months of the mafia life, the recipe is no longer his, and neither is the production, and the money he's making is worthless because he's not free to run away from the family. He's been reduced down to the recipe for some booze, not a man, but ingredients for profit. He turns to drinking heavily to cope, but this doesn't change the fact that once the recipe isn't his, he's worthless to anyone involved, and he can never get away because they would never let the recipe get out to another family to cut into their profits. And it happens. The recipe does make its way to another family, so when he betrays the Vanettis in an attempt to ruin Avillio's revenge plot and save his friend, he ends up as the target instead because he's no good to anyone anymore. It's directly stated to him. He was only worth a recipe. Forced to the brink, he becomes a madman, brutally beating the head of another family to death unless he wants to be killed himself. Where Avillio always had another option in Corteo but instead chose this life, Corteo doesn't. Everything he did, he was forced to do. No choice, no freedom, and all his good qualities abused. He's reduced to a very literal nothing. It's the kind of thing Avillio thought he was, which Corteo actually is. He ends up as a captive of the Vanettis as they learn of his attempted betrayal. Seeing him at this low of a point of genuinely having no reason to live, Avillio recognizes his own mistakes. With this perspective of someone who actually has nothing, he realizes that he does have something in Corteo and that his actions made someone else into what he thought he was. And so he goes from telling him to get out of his life to freeing him from captivity and stealing him away from the family. And from there, things really do look up for a second. They basically start a new life together, coming home to Avillio's crappy house and turning it into a real home. They buy actual food to cook actual meals, they set up more than just a bare space and smile and laugh together. They even go on a tour of the town and just live for once, not driven by goal or obsession, but just by enjoying what those things led them to miss for so long. Corteo dumps out all of the booze they had left and remarks that they can start over. But obsession doesn't end so easily. Avillio's got him in deep, and the Mafia would know what happened if he suddenly stopped doing business with them, so he has to keep up his dealings or give away the entire game. So he and Corteo work out a plan to keep him hidden from the family, but with underhanded dealings afoot, of course something goes wrong, and Avillio is questioned when he returns to the Vanettis, heavily suspected of helping a traitor escape. It seems at this moment he almost accepts that if he dies, because he's learned that he fixed his former evils and allowed the good that always remained for him to live elsewhere. In living that life he always could have for a moment, he found something not to maintain a pointless existence, but something even worth dying for. But Corteo is manipulated into returning to save Avillio, bursting in at the last moment to take the blame. And this offers Nero a solution. If Avillio can kill Corteo, then he's still trustworthy and clearly couldn't have betrayed the family. Avillio and Corteo then have their final conversation, where the abuse of the latter comes full circle. By ending his friend's life right here, Avillio will become untouchably loved by the family. By killing the only thing he's ever truly had but was blind to, he gains the thing he thought he wanted, but which leaves him with nothing valuable at all. Right here, either Corteo dies or they both die. For once, Avillio finally has no choice, and he pulls the trigger. It's here, without any support or love except the false trust from the family he hates, that Avillio finally feels what it's truly like to have nothing but obsession. It's at that moment for the first time he actually had nothing to live for, and it was done by his own hand. And that's how he's able to see through his original plan that he knew was so worthless now, because what else is there to do? It's follow through or just die a bit earlier. So far, we've seen two cases. We've had obsession over something gained, leading to a destruction of self, and obsession over something lost, preventing one from ever forming to begin with. But what about something else? What about obsession over the impossible? Enter serial experiments Lain, of course. The anime is an abstract mess, delving into conspiracy theory at its lowest points, but overarching that mess are core ideas, and one is the crisis of self. The main character Lain is a timid schoolgirl, more content to do nothing while her friends are all out at clubs. She's behind on technology, daydreams odd things through her classes, and just kind of seems to be a bit of a blank slate that's bland and behind everyone else. But suddenly her friends start looking at her in a different way. One night out at the club, they saw someone who looked exactly like her causing a ruckus, telling people off, and being all firm and commanding, the exact opposite of who Lain is. With this mystery, as more and more people talk about another Lain or other Lains, as well as the invitation of her recently deceased classmate Chisa to find a new life on the Wired, Lain becomes drawn to it. The Wired is their name for the connection of all devices used for anything from communication to games, kind of like the internet. Since the other versions of her seem to spawn from the Wired, only by entering it can she discover the truth. However, as Lain is very behind on technology, while her friends all talk about the importance of checking your email daily, she has an unused kid's model of a computer called a Navi just sitting in her room doing nothing. Technology just isn't her thing, even with a technophile father. And it's maybe because of him. I mean, he often outright ignores his family to play with his tech, so why would she enjoy it? But her quest requires it, and so she does it, moving from a better model Navi to custom processor upgrades to a collection of a bunch of technology to this liquid, cold tumor that emerges from the side of her house as she becomes nothing but technology. Once not even really sure what email was, in such a short span of time she ends up here. It's an obsession. No matter what anyone says or any warning from her father or whoever it may be, it's never enough. Her crisis of self is expressed physically in this technology, the means to uncover who she is. This level of ability and skill, plus the digging she does across the Wired to try and find the truth, makes her a bit of an online legend. A friend to some and an enemy to others, even an angel or a god depending on who you ask. She's in so deep that she's interacting with basically the Illuminati when she speaks with the Knights. This Lain is clearly on another level from the one we saw at the start, and it shows in her demeanor. Just as she's known as different people, she kind of begins to feel like it too in what we truly witness of her. Sometimes she's home alone and sad as before, other times she's forcing information out of a kid with threats or telling kidnapper businessmen off for being weird or even laughing or joking with whoever's there, just abstract forms and nothingness. Lain doesn't even really seem like Lain anymore. And so, doesn't that defeat the very purpose of her obsession in the first place? In trying so hard to discover who she is, she had to become someone different. Obsession inherently produces this change, accelerating the natural shifts in who we are over time. As it limits our desires and inclinations down further and further, we become more and more distinct from the being originally developing that first desire to begin with, until we are nothing more than the obsession. So the answer to the question, who am I, is who am I? She's reduced herself down to nothing more than an expression of this question. The ability to answer invalidates the reason for asking to begin with, that impossible to understand human complexity. We see this expressed in how many incongruent and seemingly random representations of Lain there are. If you sum them all up, you don't find an answer. We don't even know where or when or why they came from, or even if they're real or just another plot to manipulate her, just something made up. All you'd get from taking them all together is doubt on every single level. And that's what Lain becomes akin to. One word, an idea, a concept, and nothing more. She just is doubt. As her friends have fun with her, she's watching herself from the side because she has become the self watching herself and judging it, not actually herself living in the moment. She's so far into her own head that her interactions feel like they're driven by someone else, and she is just the observer judging it all. There was no answer to her question, so by obsessing over it and slowly reducing her being down to answer it and nothing more, she'll continually reach extremes that push her further and further past reality to prevent finding an end which invalidates what remains of her to begin with. And she is well past reality. She essentially ascends, earning herself godlike powers to manipulate the world as she wishes. And with that, she seeks to create a solution to the problem which lacks one. She creates a Lain which replaces the one everyone knows. She rewrites their memories of her to be the same, positive ones between everyone. Within the minds of others, there are no longer separate and distinct Lains. There's only one image of herself placed in there as she commanded. But doesn't this kind of prove that she's become more akin to a concept than a person anyway? Crucial to being a person is existing in separate states we can't control. Yes, we are who we believe ourselves to be, but that makes up an exceptionally small portion of how we're actually perceived overall, because each person who perceives us has their own idea of who we are. Deep or shallow, it exists in their mind. We're so indifferent to our friends, than our coworkers, than our teachers, than our acquaintances, than the person who hands you your coffee, and the person who sees you take it in line, and the person who holds the door open as you leave. Each one has a version of us that they control the ultimate outcome of in their head. They can use an idea of us to justify anything, like holding a door open or not, based on how we look. This is what the multiple Lains are. They act beyond her control because they're all the picture of her in other people's minds. By creating one which encompasses all of those minds, she doesn't have the complexity of a human being anymore. She's like a basic process of what it means to be human, like breathing. She's something that every human just does without consideration or question, which is the same between us all as a fact of life. She's actually reduced herself even lower by consolidating herself like this. I think this forces an answer out of the unanswerable question, but only by effectively making her inhuman. Who am I? I am nothing. Finding out still defeats the purpose of asking when it's obsessive. So there's only one natural end to her quest: to embody that forced answer. She removes all memories of her from the world overall, creating a blank slate. There are no other Lains, there just is the one Lain who exists everywhere and anywhere, undefined in every way by being nothing. The only way for one to ever fully answer the question, who am I, is to stop changing, to stop interacting, to stop existing, to be nothing. By obsessing over this question, Lain led herself to a lonely oblivion, although she does appear to re-enter the world at the end. But all this pain came about from the obsession over something with no end. If one becomes a question that can't be answered, then one simply isn't to begin with. As always, I had an ulterior motivation in making this video. When you see someone with a YouTube channel full of half-hour plus long video essays about themes in anime, you can probably hazard a decent guess that I'm a fairly obsessive person. I want to find something that scratches a deep itch, find every ounce of truth within it, and only then move on to something new. I know that we aren't creatures meant to be so deeply thoughtful about every single piece of entertainment we consume, and of course, I watch some mindless things or background noise as well, but I guess I always feel like a good story deserves more than just a watch and a forget. But I'm constantly in a circle of justifying my own work by justifying how impactful stories can be to our sense of self. I have no regrets about what I do. It's something that I want to keep doing for a long time, but it is a bit of an odd state to be doing something like this almost professionally, looking at stories and how they can change people, especially myself and my most popular videos. In a way, I've stumbled into monetizing my emotions. The wheels of business and algorithms turned forward, giving definitive metrics to measure what I should and shouldn't feel from my life experiences and how I should present it to other people. A video talking about that exact feeling in a series or 2 or 3, and then my own experience with it. You might notice a pattern in how this video is put together. It's something I still enjoy doing. I think this past year has been the best goddamn stage of my content for sure. And if I didn't need the money to survive, I wouldn't want it from doing this, so I'll never call this state of business invalidating to what I create. But I can't deny that sometimes it worsens that obsession. When I feel something, my first thoughts are how to package and express that emotion in an entertaining way that other people can learn from. And the more intense the experience, the more obsessive the writing. A few weeks ago, I had a moment that changed me. The moment itself isn't really our focus, and to tell the whole thing would be a script all of its own, and I know I started writing it and basically wrote a whole different thing and realized it didn't fit in this one at all. All I needed to explain is that it was almost inexplicable. I went from the depths of depression and self-doubt to one of the happiest experiences of my life in the span of maybe 30 minutes, in a situation that validated both my change in the past year, the work I do here on the channel, and my sense of identity all in one. I'm not exaggerating at all when I say it feels like the stars aligned just right. Every dot which was swirling around in my head for months had finally connected, and I wanted to untangle that web and present it here in my usual format, both for you all and for myself. I started with a few notes on my phone the next day, and of course a few series that would fit the principle I was covering. It was nothing major yet. I just jotted down my super rough outline of what I could cover from each story and relate to my own, and it seemed like a great basis, and it had a lot of emotion behind it. But rewatching just one of the series, I noticed it really fit the bill more than the rest. So I started to focus on just that one, and once I'd written the bit on that, if there was still time left in the script, then I could write the other two. And at the same time, I'm still processing this emotion as it was evolving. I mean, I would kind of describe it as coming back from a different world you loved to one you hated, and that generally puts your mind through grief. So this wasn't one single realization to cover, but rather a slow evolution of feelings, from the immediate depression afterwards, to the way it fades, to the depression about the fact the experience was fading, and it was a very complex thing. And to explain my story, I had to really explain the entire year before it, which was hard to manage in a video where the series I was still covering was also itself ballooning. I was rewatching it and noticing a lot more than I'd expected. Each character had their own little evolutions and inputs, building off of a previous video where I'd covered the anime in the same way my story was built off of previous times where I'd talked about it before. In fact, a story I told before about myself was crucial to how I had this moment to begin with, so then that needed to be addressed too. This was starting to really get bigger than I thought, and that meant I was doing a couple rewatches of this series as well. Yes, a couple. None of my notes really seemed to cover everything. I hit a certain train of thought and that felt amazing, but then 3/4 of the way through it would fall off, and suddenly it seemed worthless without a weighty conclusion. So I had to keep going back in and trying to find something to make it make sense, and then I'd find something else that needed covering to cover that, to make a new, more complex conclusion make sense with all the stuff that was there before it. And it was like each line was branching into 3 more, which then did the same themselves, and then did the same themselves again. Every script came from what felt like a good outline, like I'd finally got it, and it was perfect, it was down, just needed to write it. But then I would, and it would read as a complete, disjointed, awful mess that no one would like. I reordered and rewrote and expanded and contracted certain sections, but nothing fit, nothing seemed to fix this. I had outline take 2, outline take 3, outline for real, outline again, and outline again, each with their own script that fit with that outline, and it just began to feel overdone and pointless. I'd filled the Notes app on my phone too, so I was now digging through multiple pages within multiple apps to try and compose these thoughts into what it felt like they needed to be. Suddenly I'd be searching across all these different spaces, I'd lose the train of thought, I'd pick up another one, they'd mix together in my head so I'd write them the same, even though they weren't the same. It became a complete mess. And so trying to figure this all out, especially having it on my phone, I wasn't messaging anyone or opening any social media or anything, because each time I went on my phone, I was jotting down more and more and more from the threads that I was constantly running about my head, all this garbage from the series. And at the same time, I began to wonder how I did this before, feeling so incapable of doing it now. Each thing I wrote felt like some worthless recap of plot and nothing more. Had my writing really changed that much since a year ago? This was really getting to me. It was a doubt I already had before this that was now seeing its prime, and so I started to do something I never did before. I rewatched my old videos. I never do that because I don't want to make what I did before, I want to make what I evolve into now. But this time, I couldn't help it. There must have been something that I was missing from that time that made it all work, because I couldn't get it to work right now. So I did it. While I was working my day job, I would put my own videos on, trying to uncover some pattern in how I address things, the depth of each topic, how much recap there was, everything that felt like it could be a factor. While I was still trying to analyze the topic, I was now analyzing my own videos in between failed scripts to see what the problem was, while also analyzing other people's video essays to see if that could give me anything. And what I found in my own, I didn't like. I started to lose confidence in my own prior work. None of them felt worthwhile for this kind of topic either, and I was looking at my most popular videos thinking about how they were just crappy recaps of anime. Safe to say, I was a bit distraught at the same time as trying to do way too much in each day. I was already running late on sleep to try and get this done, but now when I finally did turn in, I wasn't sleeping much. Every thought I had lying there in bed had somehow trailed back into these topics and myself, and it was impossible to sleep with that running in my head. I kept not really communicating with anyone either, because again, I was on my phone, I was doing this, and also because, well, I couldn't find an interest in what they said or find anything else to say myself aside from what was on my mind, this topic, and myself. Meals were secondary. I'd eat, but I didn't care what it was as long as it was quick. If I could get it done in 5 minutes on my lunch break, then spend 25 minutes writing, that was the best. And if I was driving, which is a lot more time than I'd like each day, you best believe I had something on to try and dig deeper into it, because that's a lot of time going to waste. I was starting scripts by saying I didn't want to make this video anymore, but I had to make this video. I had to make all this toil feel worthwhile. I had to understand what had happened and how it connected all these dots. I had to understand this story that I loved so much and how it fit. I had to figure out my own conflict with it and its own internal conflicts I was starting to notice when I looked deeper in it, because then I could understand this feeling I had and what it meant, and it was going to be the greatest video yet from all of this, the deepest topic I'd ever had. It would validate everything before it and everything after it and live up to that standard I set a year ago, but actually be a lot better than that when I was talking about understanding these harsh truths. And I don't know how anything else could matter when this needed done first, because this was the platform from which everything was built. This was not the meaning of the story, this was the meaning of meaning itself that would validate what I do for me and why I existed at all in the fucking first place. After 3 weeks of that going in my head constantly, I started to think that maybe it could never happen. I tried to stay positive, but I wrote down for myself a few times that I wasn't sure if it ever could. This topic was everything, and I was failing. I wondered if this was it, if I was done. I knew every star faded, and I'd gotten a lot farther than a lot of other people had, and I'm grateful every day that I got to do that, but I guess finally staring down what felt like the end for the first time, like the true end, like this is it, I would give up and do something else. I just always figured I'd go a little bit further first. Now I was wondering who I would be without the channel. Would I be happy, or even could I be happy? When I wasn't thinking about the video now, I was thinking about this. I'd have to finally make those stressful career moves of moving up I didn't want to, but I'd always put them off because I was sure of a future doing this, and now, well, I wasn't just unsure if I could do it, I was unsure if I wanted to do it. My brain felt broken by all of this. Maybe it was time to give in to everything I hated and just distract myself from meaninglessness with possessions and relationships, and one day I'd forget the 8-year quest I'd been on to chase this dream. This was a span of 3 weeks that had me questioning 8 whole years. That had me questioning not just who I was, but who I wanted to be. I'd picked an unanswerable question through an extremely complex topic, and then tried to explain that complex topic with a complex story that's famous for being complex. I told myself it was everything, that it wasn't something I wanted to do, but something I had to do. I actually wrote that in scripts. I was going to say that on the internet in a video essay, and it feels like the cheesiest character in the worst movie. And in that, actual inspiration struck. After thousands of words across how many pages, I started to see who I was acting like. Some obsessive character in any number of shows I'd analyzed before. All those characters I'd witnessed over time who were destroyed by their obsession. And I learned nothing from everything I talked about before. The most invalidating thing to my work wasn't failing at one topic after succeeding at 100 plus. It was ignoring what all of the previous ones had taught me to try and make one stupid topic. Maybe if I just moved on, it would work. I was desperate enough to consider finally giving this topic up. One last gasp, but could I do anything? So I took this new feeling, I sat down, scribbled out a few rough ideas for this video, and 2 days later when I could work again, I sat down for 8 hours and wrote it all the way through from ideas to outline to script. It wasn't at all that I had lost my touch. It was that I got into my own head, becoming the me, analyzing my own analysis as it was happening, obsessing over something that couldn't be solved. You know why I couldn't make anything from this topic? Because it made no sense. Because at the end of the day, nothing makes sense. There is no string through life connecting the dots. There is no one sentence that makes it make sense. Things happen and we feel a certain way about them, and then they go away with no closure because normality is this force that pushes everything back to this mundane level. This is part of what was being said, but it wasn't satisfying. All that work I'd done wasn't to hear that. I needed something more, some life-changing statement, because I wanted my life to change. I was a terrified kid screaming for a more enjoyable world they'd gotten a taste of and now didn't want to live without. And that desire grew, and it darkened, and it consumed a lot of my life ever so slowly, and it turned into obsession. I tackled something much too big for some mid-20s anime fan to try and tackle, but then I said I had to do it. I was attempting to solve the point of my life when I'd only lived some third of it so far. What a disrespect to the rest of anything I'd ever experienced to try and solve it right now. And in that, I was invalidating the entire path that brought me here and questioning if I wanted the future at all. To try and make sense of this life, I was committing to giving up everything which had defined it before and which I thought would define it after. To throwing away everything to understand. It's only really hitting as I record these words with my own voice. I love every bit of what I get to do here. This is who I am and who I want to be here on this channel, that annoying person who looks into stories a little too deeply and doesn't shut up about them. This is the most validating thing in my life and what it's all been built around. It's a rock that got me through a goddamn pandemic, for fuck's sake. I cut my teeth building this channel from the ground up alone after my best friend who I started with decided I wasn't worth shit. It's everything I'm proud of in a world where I'm forced to do so many things I am not of and hate and all of that. And one little topic had me ready to throw that all away, to give up who I was without even realizing it, thinking I was doing the opposite. Obsession is a terrible thing. We all experience it in some amounts. It's just a stronger form of desire at the end of the day, and we all need desires. Obsession can occur for anything, for gains or losses, for ideas or concepts, for people or places, for anything and everything. And it is a self-justifying cycle, a narrowing path that only ever leads to one singular point, and we don't want to reach that point. It can pop up at any time from anywhere, and even if we learn about it, it might still happen and we'll completely miss it. Over the course of 3 weeks, it almost destroyed a dream I've held seriously for, at the time of this video going up, 8 years now. The channel just turned 8 2 days before this released, and the very moment that I'm recording all of this. How fucked up is that? 3 weeks could destroy 8 years of my life, and not from some cataclysmic event, not from some chance of fate or the world or something horrible happening, just from my own mind getting too within itself. Obsession is a terrible beast. Eventually, it becomes us, so we have to end it before that spells an end to us. So that's what I'm going to do here now. Thousands of words, some 70 pages, ideas that almost came to define every single aspect of my being. It is sitting in the trash right now on Drive, ready to be deleted. Not sitting there ready to go to the trash, right in the trash, ready to be deleted forever. One click, and that's it. It's gone. And you know what? I've never been so happy to lose 3 weeks of work in my entire life. Goodbye, obsession. Knowing you fucking sucked.